A lot of people have heard of the development called the 78 in Chicago. Basically, it's a planned redevelopment of this 62-acre lot about 1 mile south of downtown. They're planning to put in a new White Sox stadium, among other stuff, and it's being designed by Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, one of the goats of Chicago architecture. But although I am interested in the future of the 78 project, the one thing I couldn't seem to wrap my mind around was how does 62 acres of land, basically a mile from the city center, just sit empty? Looking at historical satellite views, we can see that 25 years ago, the lot looked pretty similar to how it does now. And research suggests it's been like that for closer to 50 years. And as it turns out, the story is actually pretty interesting. This area actually used to have the Chicago River running through it. Everyone's heard the story of the city reversing the flow of the Chicago River, but I hadn't ever heard about the time when they straightened out a bend in it in the 1920s. So obviously, the question to be asked is why did they want to straighten the river? Straightening the bend in the river was actually part of Daniel Burnham's plan for Chicago, and there were two main reasons: ship navigation and road connections between the South Side and the Loop. First, the ship navigation. Starting in the late 19th century, various government bodies became interested in a complete Great Lakes to Gulf of Mexico shipping route, and the Chicago River became somewhat part of the plan. The idea was to have large vessels traverse down through the South Branch, and this was made challenging due to the bend in the river. Second, the South Side development had always been bottlenecked by the river, meaning the only north south downtown streets capable of supporting large trucks that could extend past the river bend were State and Wabash. So, if the river moved, Franklin, Wells, LaSalle, and Dearborn streets could be extended, and the South Side could, in theory, better connect to downtown. So they went ahead with straightening the river, completing it in 1929 after many years of legal disputes over land ownership and whatnot. But even though they finished the project, many of the benefits were never fully realized. Most of the commercial shipping started going down to Calumet Harbor, so that benefit was moot. And regarding the South Side development, they never extended the streets. On the east side of the river was a rail yard that they just never moved. There was a Grand Central Station at the time that was fed by some of the tracks on the east side of the river. The railroads wanted a single Union station instead of the several rail stations, and it got built, but they didn't end up getting rid of this Grand Central Station for some reason. So then 40 years go by, during which America gets addicted to cars and they knock down Grand Central Station. So then we enter the purgatory period, starting in 1969. For about 30 years, this massive, seemingly prime ish real estate near downtown was vacant, and I haven't read anything about what was going on during that period. But in the late 90s, Chicago decided they would incentivize development by offering tax increment financing. This is where it gets interesting because this classically Illinois guy named Tony Retzko buys the property in the early 2000s. Retzko owned a bunch of Papa John's franchises and was a big fundraiser for some corrupt politicians. Apparently, Retzko tried to put an IKEA on the lot, which didn't happen, then later had a large development plan, which didn't happen, then sold it to a European firm, and Retzko himself went to prison for some shady business. Since then, this area has been called Retzkoville, which is a pretty cool name, actually. Then Rahm Emanuel wanted to get things moving while he was mayor, threatening to snag the land through eminent domain, so a blandly named firm called Related Midwest bought the lot about 10 years ago. And now things seem like they're maybe going to happen. They've even pretty much finished extending Wells Street, and it looks great with a separated raised bike lane, which is very rare in the city thus far. So, in conclusion, this massive empty lot is a massive empty lot because about 100 years ago, they moved a river, and instead of using that space to improve the south side, they kept it for railroad tracks, serving a railroad station that was planned for obsolescence that they never made obsolete. Then it became obsolete on its own, and the land eventually entered Illinois corrupt politics purgatory. Thanks for watching.